Good evening, ladies and gentlemen. I'd like to call this meeting of the Zoning Board of Adjustment of the Town of Wolfeboro to order. My name is Fred Tedeschi. I act as chairman of this group. To my immediate left is Sarah Silk. She's our vice chair. To her left is Luke Freudenberg. He's a voting member. To my right, far right, is Tim Cronin. He is the clerk. And to my immediate right is Peter Colcourt. He's a voting member of the board. I think with the permission of the other members, I'd like to take this out of order, and we'll do our application first, and then we can do our housekeeping after that. So would the clerk read the first notice?
Tonight's case is Tax Map 201-9, case number 07-V-19, applicant Albert and Sandra Minotti. Public hearing for a variance under Article 175, Section 80 of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to permit the construction of a garage within the side setbacks. This property is located at 63 Port Weldon Road. I got that right. Site visit was held today at 6:30, attended by Chairman Fred Tedeschi, Peter Colcourt, Sarah Silk, Luke Freudenberg, and Tim Cronin. Appropriate copies were sent to all the agencies listed, along with all of the abutters.
Thank you.
Fred, before we start the public hearing, I just want to let it be known that Dale and I have done work for the attorney that is representing the people, but I have never done any work for the people before us, and I feel that I can be impartial.
Okay. Thank you. Does anyone have any objection? Okay. Hearing none or seeing none. Mr. DeVilder, you want to present your case here?
Thank you. Kurt DeVilder. I represent the applicants, Albert and Sandra Minotti. We appreciate the board taking its time to hear this matter this evening, and also for going to the site. We had a site visit prior. What my clients are seeking to do as per the application is to build a detached two-car garage in the only place that is possible on their lot. It's a 24 by 26 structure. The setback requirement, side setback, is 20 feet. The encroachment would be somewhere between 16 feet and 17.5 feet into the side setback. I am going to more or less go through the addendum to the application, which I prepared and submitted to the board previously. First of all, this is not contrary to the public interest. I cited the Malky Glenn Associates case. I'm not going to reiterate that, but in sum, the Supreme Court rejected a ZBA finding that encroachment on a wetlands buffer alone was insufficient to find that the variance was contrary to public interest. Here we have a similar situation. They are seeking an encroachment into a setback in an already moderately dense neighborhood. Like that case, this request is for a dimensional restriction variance, not use variance. The subject property is in a small neighborhood about a half mile from the nearest main road, Route 109. It's a private location. It's a single-family residence. The garage is of modest size that they're proposing and located to the side of the dwelling. It's between the dwelling and the adjacent lot line as opposed to being between the residence and the street. It is typical of garages throughout the neighborhood where the property is located. Once constructed, it's not likely to even, I would posit, even be noticed by the public. There should be no impact, let alone one that's detrimental to the public interest. The intrusion is not unduly and in a marked degree in conflict with the ordinance such that it violates its basic objectives. The structure is not going to alter the character of the neighborhood, injure rights of others, or undermine public interest. It would allow for the construction of a garage within a setback, where right now, as you saw, a porch and a temporary vehicle shelter stand. So within the purview of the statute, it's not contrary to the public interest. This is within observance of the spirit of the ordinance. The subject property is in the residential district, the purpose of which is to provide medium-density development near central services in a manner typical in many New England villages. Accessory structures are permitted under the ordinance. As noted, this is a dimensional, not use variance. The subject property is a year-round structure. My clients do live there year-round. It's in a neighborhood of year-round residential structures. A garage on site would be consistent with that use, as well as the surrounding uses. It would allow them to store their vehicles, lawn care tools, and other personal property out of the elements. They are utilizing that portable shelter that everyone saw there, which would go away, although that is permissible as a temporary structure. it is less efficient and less aesthetically pleasing than would a permanent garage be. And it's going to go in the same locations, so if we were to consider the issue of groundwater permeability, we are removing one roof and replacing it with another. So it's not really an area coverage issue. Also, their intention is to remove that porch that you saw. So again, they're removing a roof, which will be a roof area, which is going to be replaced by a roof area in a different location. So again, it's not that they're covering a substantially larger portion of the lot, if at all. So substantial justice would be done by the granting of the variance from dimensional controls. The guiding rule under the FAR-R case is that any loss to the individual that is not outweighed by a gain to the general public is an injustice. So the court would also consider whether the proposed use is consistent with the area's present use, which I have already covered. And under that case, it should be pointed out that the facts used to support a finding that substantial justice would be done by the granting of a variance in that case were the use would not alter the character of the neighborhood, injure the rights of others, or undermine public interest. The applicant currently resided in the property and wished to remain. The applicant had made substantial renovations to the structure. The residential appearance of the building would not change, and adjoining buildings were of a use consistent with the subject property's intended use. That is exactly the situation that we're faced with here. So the loss to the applicants would be significant, as unlike many of their neighbors, they would not be able to have a garage to shelter their vehicle and property from the elements in their year-round residence. They might have to continue to use unsightly temporary structures. The general public would see no gain whatsoever from the denial of this application. My clients have been in this house since 1998. They've made substantial investments of time, effort, and finances to convert it to what is now their retirement home, and they are there on a full-time basis. So they are looking to get what many of us enjoy, which is a year-round shelter for their cars. So the fourth point, impact on property values. This will not diminish the value of the surrounding properties. I can't, in having done so many of these, I can't envision a scenario, well, I can't envision how this scenario would have a negative effect on surrounding property values. I don't really think it would have any. If any, it would be positive by improving the structure. Perhaps there might be a marginal uptick in the value of the neighboring properties, and also maybe removing that temporary shelter would benefit the neighbors' values as well. Literal enforcement would result in an unnecessary hardship. The special conditions of property that distinguish it are its layout. The driveway is parallel, as you saw, and closest to the southeast border of the property. However, the septic cleanout, as we discussed on site, is next to the house. It's impossible for the garage to be attached to the house there. The house layout is designed so the entrance is on that side, adjacent to the driveway. In front of the house is the sewage containment system, so it of course can't be there. The bedrooms and basement bulkhead are on the other side of the house, and then out back the lot is very wet, so placement of the garage anywhere else on the property would not be possible. So owing to the special conditions of the property, no fair and substantial relationship exists between the purposes of the ordinance applicable to the application and the specific application of the provision on the property. So the garage is an accessory structure which is allowed by the ordinance. The setback requirement is the only thing preventing its placement. So enforcement of the requirement by denial of the variance request for dimensional controls would not preserve the nature of the neighborhood, because again, there are other garages just like this in the neighborhood. The proposed use is reasonable. It's a two-car garage on a year-round home. I don't need to belabor that. And as an alternative argument, if the criteria were not established, an unnecessary hardship would be deemed to exist because, owing to the special conditions that I just discussed, the subject property can't be reasonably used in strict conformance with the ordinance, again, because it's a year-round residence and they're needing to garage their vehicles and personal property out of the winter elements. So I want to touch on the memo that I received from Matthew Sullivan today. It's the memo, it was attached to an email, and it's dated May 28th. I imagine the board has received it and reviewed it. There is this temporary structure there. My review of the zoning ordinance, and Matt might disagree, but my review of the zoning ordinance, I think it's pretty clear that that's a temporary structure, and there is no permit necessary to have a structure like that because it's a temporary structure, and it doesn't need to be there for any fixed period of time. The ordinance says not attached to the ground and not to, I'm going to misquote it. Basically, it's a 90-day test, and although it's certainly been there for more than 90 days, it could be taken down tomorrow and put back up the next day. It's that simple. It's a temporary structure. It's a large tent, basically, for a car. So I don't know that I would agree that it has to be taken down or that a permit is necessary, but regardless, if the application is granted, it's going to go away, and the garage is going to be in its place, so that alleviates the issue. There was a note that there were no elevation informations. If necessary, they could supplement with a more detailed drawing showing the overhang, as we discussed on site. If necessary, they would be agreeable to limiting the encroachment to the edge of the overhang as opposed to the outer wall surface for clarity's sake. And again, only if necessary, because they want to avoid what would be a significant multi-thousand-dollar expense, but if necessary to the granting of the variance application, they would also be willing to have a survey conducted to ensure that they are not exceeding the encroachment that they're requesting. So they also have some neighbors here, the Greeleys, who are in support, as far as I can tell. They are the only neighbors present. I don't see anyone here that is in objection, but I'm sure that the board will inquire of that, nor was, for the record, anybody on site one way or the other. So again, thank you for your time, and if you have any questions, I'd be happy to answer them.
Any questions for the applicant?
I do have a question. Relative to Matt's memo and the fact that we didn't have any elevation information, is this just a garage? It's not having any kind of second story or anything on it?
That's correct.
Okay, thank you for that clarification.
It's a one-story structure, then?
I'm sorry.
It's a one-story structure.
Yes.
Any other questions for the
I have a
applicant?
question for Matt on requirements for permitting on a temporary garage. Where I used to serve in Connecticut, there was a permit required to get one of those, and it had to fall within all the side back. Could you tell us what the law is here, the regulation?
So Mr. DeValder and I clearly have a disagreement about the applicability of the temporary and structural portion of the ordinance to a carport like this. Regardless of the disagreement, I would argue that a structure like this is subject to side setbacks. With that said, I'm not sure that that structure is germane to the application this evening. As Mr. DeValder noted, it's an issue that would have to be handled after the fact, but I don't believe it has any bearing on the application in front of you this evening. But I do believe they are subject to structural setbacks.
Okay, any other questions? Is there anyone else who wishes to speak in favor of the application? Could you come and identify yourself for the record, please?
Sorry. We're abutters. We've
Excuse me, you have to pull the microphone down or we can't hear you. Thank you.
we're abutters with the Minottis. We have been and neighbors for over 10 years, and we're all for it. No
Great.
problem.
Thank you.
Are you the folks that are building the new house next door?
No.
No.
Anyone else wish to speak in favor of the application? Anyone wish to speak against the application? All right, I'll close the public meeting and we'll discuss this amongst ourselves. Any comments, thoughts? Sarah?
Yes, I was impressed when we went out to the site to see how steep that drive was. That is another constrictor on that lot. And I also made note of the number of houses as they came down the street that have garages. And indeed, several of them, just before you get to the curve, not only have two-car garages, but they do have a second story that looks as if it might even have living space there. And I thought that that was pertinent to our consideration.
Any other discussion?
I think this is going to do nothing but make it look better, give them what they want, and be a real upgrade for the neighborhood.
Okay. So shall we just go quickly through the 5 criteria here then? I'll go through them. If anyone has any disagreements with my observations, please let me know. I know you're not shy. The first criteria is it's not contrary to the public interest. And I think we've seen that what we're looking at here is very typical of what the neighborhood looks like. Clearly, most of the places have at least two-car garages, if not outbuildings as well. There does not appear to me anyway to be a problem that would unduly and in a marked degree conflict with the ordinance by putting this garage structure right near to the property line. I also note that they're planning to remove the existing porch and the temporary structure. So I think that would be of assistance.
Yeah, looking at, we do have sort of a scale drawing here, although we don't have a survey. It would appear as if the porch is at least 25% of what the garage would be. So I thought that was important because of the problem with runoff in that area, that it won't really contribute that much more runoff. And also, there would be a certain amount because of the roof for the temporary garage that's already in place. It would be replacing that.
And as part of the permitting process, water management is considered, as I recall. So whatever additional issues would arise by having a slightly larger structure covering the ground would be taken care of there. Okay. The spirit of the ordinance is observed. It seems to me that the structure is certainly in conformance with the neighborhood, and that's what our ordinance is designed to do. It's try to maintain the appearance of our neighborhood. Any further comments on observance of the spirit of the ordinance? Substantial justice is done. I think here clearly the loss to the applicants would be very significant if they were not able to have a permanent garage. I don't see any real gain to the public by denying this application for a variance. It does not appear to me, from observation anyway, to have any impact on the nature of the neighborhood. And the new house to the right of, as you face it, they had an opportunity to come in and state their points of view, and they did not. So I'm assuming there's no objection there either. So I think substantial justice would be done by granting this application. 4, impact on property values. It seems to me that the proposed garage is in conformity with the neighborhood. It's a two-car garage, not an oversized garage. There are other properties there that do have additional structures as well. And by removing the porch, that certainly does not increase the amount of visual impact. So I don't see any issue there. Sarah?
I would think removing that portable structure would definitely help the...
Would improve the neighborhood.
Indeed.
Then finally, I had asked during the site visit, and Mr. DeVilda mentioned that while the lot is of significant size, the challenges in putting the garage somewhere else is that there is a lot of drainage issues in the rear, and that there's a lot of wet, almost permanently wet soil there. And perhaps that's why the grass is so green, since the septic tank is in the front.
And it was also testified that they had checked with our Public Works Director relative to the issues with that drainage in that particular area.
Okay. I think owing to those are special conditions in my mind, and I don't see any reason that the ordinance would require us to deny this application. So if everyone's in agreement, I'll accept a motion to approve the application. One other thing, we do want to put in there that, as you agreed, that the structure will be 24 by 26, and that the roof overhang will be considered the edge of the structure for the purposes of the setback. And Mr. Sullivan has got some addendums to my suggestion.
Yeah, and I'd like to touch on condition number 5, the licensed land surveyor condition, and make a bit of a case for this. When we have structural encroachments that are this extreme, just being feet away from the side property line, it puts a very challenging burden on our enforcement staff to actually ensure that these are built in the proper place. So that's the reasoning for my recommendation here. I do understand that globally, beyond this case, it does create a financial burden for people who are doing this type of project. Again, and if an alternative encroachment were proposed of maybe a less significant amount, I may not recommend that. But here, when we're just 2.5 feet away from the property line, it is a recommendation that I do support. With that said, it's ultimately up to the ZBA to make that decision. But I just wanted to explain why I've included that here as a condition of approval.
I would support Matt on that because just within a mile of my house, a tennis court was built on a wrong lot and a house was built straddling a boundary. So there is a real and present danger that things can end up where they were not intended to be.
You know, Matt, if there was a survey required when the new house next door was built?
I do not know. I'm not sure.
Because that might be a place that they could start and reduce the cost.
Yep, I think there may have been a survey performed on the side property line by a local surveyor, so that's certainly something that the applicant might consider here to reduce cost. It might not be necessary to perform a full survey of the lot, so I just wanted to touch on that. In this case and in other cases, we have permitted just one lot line to be pinned with the foundation edge or the overhang edge to be pinned or to be flagged as well, so that might be an option, and I'd be fully comfortable with that.
Okay.
Certainly does not require a full survey of the lot.
Is that okay with you, sir?
Yes, that would be preferable, actually, as opposed to having them reinvent the wheel, so to speak. They would be able to utilize the adjoining property survey if one exists, as opposed to having to go out and purchase their own. But I do think it is wise for the reason that Sarah said, which is when you build something across the property line, especially a structure, you've suddenly rendered your property essentially valueless because you can't sell it. So nobody wants that.
I think it's cheaper to have the survey done first than to move the garage after it's built.
That's right.
And you don't have a clear title, then you can't sell your lot later. So
Okay, any further discussion? Okay. I'll accept the motion.
And just for clarity, this is measured to the overhang, the 2.5 feet to the overhang. That's how I propose this rather than
And that's condition 5 in your,
it is measured to the overhang.
okay. Anyone do you want me to make the motion? All right, I move that we approve the application of Albert and Sandra Minotti, tax map 201-9, case number 07V19. We obtain a variance of the under Article 175, Section 80 of the Wolfeboro Planning and Zoning Ordinance to permit construction of a garage within the side setbacks. This motion is subject to the 6 conditions that are in the planner's memo, including all state and local permits. The documentation is not sufficient for all permits. The notice of decision shall be recorded in the Carroll County Registry of Deed. A maximum encroachment of 2.5 to 4 feet to be into the side yard shall be verified by a licensed surveyor in accordance with the approved plans, and that encroachment shall be measured to the overhang of the roof, and that this variance shall be valid if exercised within 2 years from the date of the approval.
I'll second that.
Okay. Any discussion, further discussion?
Did you say that Matt's comment should be read into it also?
Yes.
Wording is confusing and frankly would render this application useless. So condition number 5, into the side setback, that should be from the side property line
Okay.
rather than into the side setback. That would effectively make the garage construction impossible.
So that would be from the side
That would be from the side property line.
as measured to the overhang.
Exactly.
Correct, thank you.
Thanks, Rick.
Yes, so clarified. Do I have a second to the motion?
I did, and I will second that.
Second clarification.
Yes.
All in favor, say aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Thank you very much. Your variance is granted. Enjoy your garage.
You get to get home before 9. 8.
Well, dinner before 9, the puck drops at 8.
Ah, yes.
Bye, everyone.
Good luck. Have a nice night.
Thank you. Okay, now we'll go back to the beginning of the agenda. The first item on our agenda is the election of the board. I think as I've discussed with Sarah and with Tim, they're willing to continue to serve, and I'm willing to continue to serve if everyone would so like. Do I have a motion to that effect?
I'll nominate Fred to be the chairman for another term.
Is there a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? I abstain. Sarah has agreed to serve as vice chair. I have a motion to elect Sarah as vice chair.
Make a motion to nominate Sarah Silk as the vice chairman for another term.
I'll second the motion. Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? And our distinguished clerk, Mr. Cronin, has agreed to serve again for another year.
I'll make a motion that he continue to do that for another year.
Is there a second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Okay. Then the next item on the agenda is consideration of alternate appointments. Since this is the first time we've had to do this, we're sort of struggling in our minds whether we have to have a formal interview process or whether we should just be thankful that people have volunteered to help us.
Would you like me to answer that, Fred?
You can appear for the public and express your view.
Well, just one brief comment. Obviously, I think we're fortunate to have three very, I think, qualified candidates submit here. We have Ms. Audrey Klein here this evening, who I think you're all familiar with. Obviously, Dave Senecal, as you've seen in your packets, was recommended by the Board of Selectmen for appointment because we have a new mechanism here where the ZBA has to formally make the appointment. And then obviously Suzanne Ryan indicated her interest as well. And just to be clear, I did inform the interested parties that they did not need to be here this evening, so please don't take their lack of attendance of any signal of their interest. But Audrey was fortunate to make it. But as the rules of procedure prescribe for, you have a maximum of 5 alternates for the board. So certainly the 3 that have offered would be fantastic candidates, I think.
Sarah?
I haven't been on the Board of Selectmen as Luke. We usually had people just come in and sort of say why they were interested and whatnot. And we do have some written information on some of them, and I think I personally am familiar with all of them. And I think in future it might be a good idea to have people come in if we do not know who they are.
Sure.
However, in light of the fact that our first Monday of May meeting had 3 people show up, one of which had to step down from an application, I think we should grab all 3 of these people as soon as possible and not let them get away. Because I think they all have skills and are familiar with the ZBA, and we are fortunate to have 3 because we have been down to 1
Yes.
all year. So
Everyone in agreement with that? Okay. I'll take a motion to appoint Dave Senecal, Suzanne Ryan, and Audrey Klein as alternates for a 1-year term.
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Second.
Any further discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? I'm sorry.
No, I just want to check with Matt. How long is their term?
So I think you should make it 1 year.
I think it's
Okay, thank you. I just want to confirm that. Yeah.
all in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. Thank you very much.
Just to clarify why I'm recommending that, obviously because we have the ongoing election cycle now, one of your alternates may be interested in actually run in for one of the vacant positions, so that would give them an opportunity to reset on an annual basis. I think that's a good way to do it.
Well, I think technically you serve until you're replaced.
That's
Till
correct.
your successor is qualified, which means you say, yes, I'll serve.
I did check with town attorney one time for something I was appointed to, and they had not reappointed anyone, and he said, unless I died, I was there until they replaced me. So, there you go.
Thank you, Audrey. We look forward to you joining our deliberations. Okay, we have some minutes here to look at.
At this point, I would just like to say, I did a quickie calculation. If we have 7 packets out there, that was 376 pages, some of this information of which has been copied 3 times. And if they double-sided these, like the Board of Selectmen had requested a number of years ago to save paper, it would have only been 188 pages.
So noted.
We do double-side the planning board packets.
Yes.
Creates a tremendous waste of ink. Taxpayer money. To justify the reason for printing things multiple times. In some cases, the iterations actually change. In other cases, frankly, count on the fact that you may not. If everyone can agree
Yes.
tonight to keeping them, then we will copy things only once.
I didn't have an issue with this fact that we have had stuff sometimes multiple times because things can get lost, strayed, whatever. But it really irritates me that they're not double-sided, because I do know that all the machines that we have in the building do double sides. Okay. And I keep trusting that someday we will stride forward in that area.
I think there has been a significant recommendation made to our distinguished town planner that if he can make some arrangements to have it double-sided, we would be greatly appreciative of it. Okay? Thank you. Okay, we have a revised minutes of the regular meeting of March 4th. Any comments on page 1? Any comments on page 2? Any comments on page 3? Any comments on page 4? And any comments on page 5? I did compare them, and all the changes we requested were made. Thank you for doing that.
I'll make a motion that we accept the minutes for March 4th, 2019 as corrected.
For a second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Any opposed? Thank you. The minutes of March 4th, 2019 are approved as amended. Next is the regular meeting of the board on May 6, 2019. Any comments on page 1? I found one extra period on page 2 in the next to the last line. Any other comments? Going once, going twice? I'll entertain a motion to approve the minutes of May 6, 2019.
So moved.
Any second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
I noticed one more. Mr. Sullivan's name is misspelled on the 3rd line. All in favor?
Which page?
On the first page.
Oh.
Oh, no, wait, it isn't. Oh, I'm sorry, I take that. Oh, it's in the 3rd paragraph under staff present. All in favor?
Aye.
Any opposed? Okay, and then we have the 3rd reading of the amended,
We have the 20th.
I'm sorry?
We have the minutes for the 20th.
Oh, did I miss that? Oh, that's right, this is an attachment to it, sorry.
Yeah.
Okay, minutes of May 20th, first page. Any comments? Second page?
The only thing I saw there was on the 2nd paragraph down, they should capitalize S for silk.
Any other comments on page 2? Page 3? Going once, page 4? Yes, sir.
There were, 1, 2, 3, 4, fifth paragraph down, the first one that's more than one sentence, it didn't, the beginning of it didn't make sense. The site is an ideal and instruction will be minimal. But we had a lengthy discussion because I know I made several comments about the positioning of the other cabinets inside that fence, and the fact that this was basically the only place you could put the cabinet, and that the positioning was in keeping with what was already there because of the constriction of the fenced-in area and whatnot. And I was impressed with the fact that the first very simple hearing of the night had a lot of detail, and then when we got to this, it just says, the board deliberated. And this is a very big project, and it was approved, but I think it should get a little more of the details of why we thought there were special conditions and what they were, and the fact that they could not put any cabinet out in front of the water tower because they have that, it's like a manhole cover and whatnot there and everything. So
I think we also discussed the site there, that it's surrounded by the school and there's a quiet neighborhood next door and being a cemetery.
So would you just like to table these for
I
correction?
think we should, yes.
I would like to make one other comment. And please correct me if I'm wrong. We did vote to approve the rules of procedure, correct? But I did not see that vote in the minutes in any location. I am certain that we did vote to do that, and I just wanted to make sure that's on the record, and I'll confirm it, but I am 99.9% positive an actual vote was taken. So just wanted to let you all know that I did not see it in the minutes. So I'll get that in there as well.
Yeah,
I think it's wise to...
Because you gave a little explanation about that, and we commented about the fact we would have broken our record for the shortest meeting if you hadn't expounded so eloquently.
Well,
So
I shouldn't have opened my mouth. That's right. But I think you ultimately did vote, but it was very quick. Bless you. It was very quick, and I think it just may have been missed in the record. So I'll ensure that that gets in there. And in the case that it wasn't voted upon, I'll certainly confirm that. But I'm certain it was.
I could,
God bless you.
do some more.
Fred, I couldn't hear Sarah before on the fifth. It says the site is an ideal, and it should say construction will be minimal, correct?
Yes, it should be construction. Ooh. Okay, so we'll agree to table those, and then now if you would double check to see whether we, my recollection is we did adopt the rules of procedure. Okay. Is there any other business to come before the board? Mr. Sullivan.
I made a comment just a few minutes ago about the term of alternates. I just want to read this section of statute to you because I think it's clear, though it does have some may language in here. So under RSA 673(6), an elected ZBA may appoint 5 alternate members for a term of 3 years each. The may applies, I think, to the 5 alternate members pretty clearly, but I think that the strict standard of 3 years is clear. So despite our prior vote, I would ask that you actually issue a corrective motion to apply, at least for the 2 non-Board of Selectmen members, to appoint them for periods of 3 years. I think that's clearly spoken for in the statute.
Have we gotten their agreement to serve for 3 years?
I just spoke with Audrey, and I think she's willing, and certainly they could resign if they chose to at a later time. But I think that I could potentially confirm with Suzanne if you are more comfortable with that. But
My only concern is we usually try to do a rotating membership
yep.
so that not everybody is by at the same time.
Yep, and the statute actually speaks to the staggered manner, and what I was thinking looking at this is that by only appointing 3 now, you are essentially staggering the terms. However, I think at a later time, if we have additional interest, we may want to consider whether or not it's in the best interest to actually appoint those folks.
Okay. So is there an amendment to our motion to appoint the alternates for a 3-year term instead of a 1-year term?
I'll make that motion.
Is there a second?
Sure.
All right, all in favor?
Aye.
I don't have a problem with not checking in with Suzanne Ryan because she's been an appointed member for years and she knows it's 3 years, so I don't think that'll be a shock to her.
Okay.
Okay.
And you agree to a 2-year extension of your sentence, of your term? Good, okay.
Right.
All right, any other business come before the board? I'll accept a motion to adjourn.
So moved.
Second?
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Anyone opposed? Meeting's adjourned.